Take a steady breath, settle into your seat, and let me walk you through the whole story from start to finish using plain, everyday words. What you are about to hear will probably turn everything you thought you knew about the last 5 years upside down. A person who stood beside you through birthdays, bad days, and long talks, someone whose smile you trusted, reached a breaking point. Their guilt got so heavy that they finally spoke up. They told the truth about a secret plot that had been running in the background of your life the entire time. That plot was not a small slip-up or a single moment of bad judgment. It was a long, careful plan carried out by a circle of people you thought were friends or family. They met in quiet rooms, chatted in hidden group messages, and worked together to change how everyone else saw you while pretending nothing was wrong. The first big piece of what they did comes down to regular hidden meetings. Picture them around a table or on a group video call. Your name was always the first item on the list. They did not simply gossip for a few minutes, laugh, and move on. They brought notebooks, screenshots, and printed posts. Anything they could find about you. They would say things like, "I'm worried about them," but it was only a trick to seem kind. Under that fake worry, they discussed every move you made on social media, every story you told, and every choice you shared with them in confidence. They asked, "How can we spin this?" They asked, "How can we look caring while making them look unstable?" They made detailed plans the way a coach draws plays on a board, deciding where each person would stand and what each person would say when someone asked about you. They were not sloppy. They practiced their words until each line sounded natural. They even practiced their facial expressions so they could look you in the eye without giving away what they had been saying behind your back. To pull this off, each person in that circle took on a special part. One person's job was to act like the calm, gentle friend. Whenever your name came up, they would sigh and say, "I just hope they're okay," planting a tiny seed of doubt in whoever was listening. A second person was the note-taker and screenshot saver. Their phone and computer were full of your posts, your messages, and pieces of private talks you thought were safe. A third person kept close contact with you. They checked in, asked how you were feeling, and seemed supportive. Then, the moment you shared something personal, they hurried to the group chat and wrote a full report. The last big role was the spreader. That person's task was to whisper the story far and wide, at work, at school, at parties. So even people who hardly knew you would start repeating the same lines, "I heard they're not doing well," or "I heard they're kind of hard to trust." By the time you walked into a room, many ears had already heard a pre-made story about you, and the people telling it felt confident because they were all using the same lines. After those roles were set, the group started something even crueler called triggers, though they used a friendlier word for it so they could feel less guilty. They would invite you to hang out and then change plans at the last minute. They would promise to save you a seat, then forget and leave you on your own. They would leave you out of a gathering and hope you noticed, just to see if you got upset enough to text them in frustration. If you reacted with anger or tears, they circled back to their audience and said, "See, this is exactly what we were talking about." If you stayed quiet, they told people, "See how withdrawn and cold they are. Something is off." It never mattered how you acted, because they could flip the story either way. They were not waiting for the truth. They were waiting for any tiny moment they could twist to fit the tale they had already written for you. While they ran those small daily tricks, they also worked on a slower, bigger plan, isolating you from anyone who might take your side. At first, they dropped gentle hints, almost like a soft breeze you hardly notice. "You know, I worry they seem stressed a lot," they would say to a mutual friend. Or, "Maybe give them some space. They've got a lot going on." The listener might shrug and agree, thinking it was harmless. Weeks later, the group circled back to that same listener with a fresh piece of proof, usually taken out of context. "Remember how we mentioned they were stressed? Look at this late-night post. They're spiraling." By repeating that pattern, hint, proof, worried tone, They slowly pulled each supportive person a little farther from you. This was not an accident. They studied common manipulation tricks online: gaslighting, making you doubt your own memory; triangulation, giving different stories to different people so no one could compare notes; and projection, blaming you for the very things they were doing. They used all three until you might have wondered if you were losing your mind, because every time you tried to speak up they had a smooth answer that made you sound confused or dramatic. Imagine how that must have felt on your end. You shared an accomplishment and got polite nods instead of excitement. You tried to explain a struggle and were gently told you might be overthinking. You asked a friend to hang out, and they were suddenly busy, though you later learned they made time for everyone else. Day by day, your world grew smaller. Your trust shrank. You might have stayed awake at night asking yourself, "Why do things feel off? Why can't I put my finger on it?" All the while the group patted themselves on the back for managing the situation. They even turned your moments of silence, those nights you kept to yourself, too tired to fight, into proof that yes, you were distant, or yes, you really had changed for the worse. What drove them to keep this going for so long? The one who finally confessed said it began with envy and the fear of losing control. Maybe you were shining in an area where they felt dim. Maybe your honesty made them feel exposed. Maybe your growth made them feel stuck. Whatever the root, they found comfort in teamwork. Together, they could scratch that itch of jealousy and still look innocent. Over time, it stopped feeling like jealousy and started feeling like normal life. Cruel acts felt routine. Only when one person's conscience grew louder than the group's approval did the first crack appear. Once that crack showed, the whole wall broke, because hidden things do not stay hidden forever. Screenshots can be, forwarded messages can be read aloud, tears can fall at odd hours, and guilty people can't always keep them in. Now that the truth is out, you may feel waves of hurt, anger, and even relief. Hurt because these were the people who said, "I am here if you need anything," and instead used your private words as fuel. Anger because they stole precious years of trust and made you doubt the solid ground beneath your feet. Relief because those years of confusion were not your fault. You were not overreacting. You were not imagining things. You were under a slow, quiet attack that even the best detective might have missed simply because you believed these people cared. Know this: the fact that you are still standing proves your strength. They tried for years to paint you as fragile, yet here you are, facing the truth head-on while their scheme has collapsed at the first real test of honesty. Where do you go from here? First, give yourself time. Big truths land hard, and it is normal to feel a rush of mixed emotions. Second, gather any support you can trust. People outside that circle who will listen without judging, or professionals trained to help unpack deep betrayal. Third, hold the proof close, but use it wisely. Some bridges may need to burn, some may not. You get to choose. Most important of all, remember that their lies do not rewrite your worth or your past. Those memories of laughter, hard work, and personal wins still belong to you. Even in moments where you were set up to fail, your real self showed up. The group story can fade. Your true story continues, clearer and stronger than before. It might take time to rebuild trust, but each new day is a step toward friendships based on real care, not hidden games. You did not deserve what happened, but you do deserve every good thing that comes after. The foundational motive the confessor revealed was not a simple misunderstanding or a fleeting disagreement that spiraled out of control. It was far more primal and far more pathetic. It began with envy, a pure, unfiltered jealousy that festered in the silent spaces between their public accolades for you and their private feelings of inadequacy. You possessed an intangible quality. Perhaps it was your unshakable confidence, your radical authenticity, a tangible success you had earned, or simply a genuine happiness that seemed to radiate from within, that acted as an unwitting mirror, reflecting back everything they felt they lacked. This reflection did not inspire them to improve their own lives. Instead, it made them feel profoundly small, and from that smallness grew a deep-seated fear. They feared your light because it exposed their own dimness, and they feared your autonomy because it highlighted their own conformity. Rather than confronting the uncomfortable work of self-improvement or gracefully stepping back from a friendship they felt unable to celebrate, they made a conscious collective decision. They would tear you down to their level, reducing your stature until they no longer had to feel dwarfed by your presence. However, this initial envy soon mutated into something darker and more systemic. What started as a malicious impulse evolved into a perverse bonding activity, a shared mission that provided their own hollow relationships with a sense of purpose and intense drama. They formed a tribe united not by common interests or genuine affection, but by a common enemy, and that enemy was you. Their friendships with one another deepened and took on a secretive, electrifying quality through their mutual participation in your destruction. They developed inside jokes that mocked your vulnerabilities, shared triumphant secrets when a particular tactic of psychological warfare proved effective, and celebrated small victories, like successfully turning a mutual friend against you, as if they were major strategic accomplishments. You became the invisible glue that held their group together, the ongoing project that gave them something to focus on besides the echoing emptiness of their own lives and the fragility of their own bonds. As they became more deeply invested in the narrative they had fabricated, a psychological phenomenon took hold. They began to genuinely believe their own lies. The confessor explained that some of them had, over time, convinced themselves they were actually doing the right thing. They had repeated the falsehood so often and reinforced them so consistently within their echo chamber that the fictions solidified into their perceived reality. They constructed an elaborate alternate history in which you were the villain, the unstable, manipulative force, and they were the valiant heroes, nobly protecting the wider social circle from your perceived toxicity. This self-deception was their ultimate psychological shield, a constructed mythology that absolved them of guilt and allowed them to sleep at night, effectively rewriting history in real time until the original fabricated premise was entirely buried beneath layers of collective delusion. This delusion was so powerful that it created a cult-like mentality with a single, unassailable doctrine. You were the problem, and any action taken against you was therefore justified. On the rare occasions when a flicker of conscience emerged within the group, when someone would tentatively voice a doubt, whispering, "Maybe we're going too far," or "I'm starting to feel guilty about this," that doubt was swiftly and ruthlessly shut down by the others. They had cultivated a culture where questioning the shared narrative was seen as the ultimate betrayal, and showing any compassion for you was treated as a sign of weakness or naivety. They actively reinforced each other's worst impulses, talking one another out of feelings of guilt and quickly reminding the doubter of the agreed-upon story, effectively stamping out any emerging conscience before it could threaten the group's unified front. The beautiful, poetic irony in all of this, which the confessor explicitly acknowledged, is that their entire campaign was ultimately a catastrophic failure. While they were investing all of their energy, time, and emotional resources into the futile project of tearing you down, you were unconsciously and organically building a life they could never touch. While they were huddled in rooms crafting narratives about you, you were out in the world living your truth. Their entire existence had, without their full realization, become entirely about you, while your existence had long since transcended any need for them. They made you their full-time project, and in doing so, revealed that you held a power over them they could never break. You had already won the unwinnable war simply by continuing to be yourself. And this confession is merely the universe's way of delivering the official scorecard, confirming a victory you had already secured through your own resilience and authenticity. So here's where it all lands, where everything that was hidden beneath the noise comes into full, piercing clarity. The confession isn't just proof of what they did, it's proof of what they feared. They didn't unite against you because you were weak. They united because you were powerful. Because somewhere deep down, they knew they couldn't imitate your courage, your originality, your refusal to bend to their quiet mediocrity. That kind of energy unsettles people who survive on control. They called it concern. They called it boundaries. They called it help. But underneath those polite labels, it was always the same primitive fear, the kind that whispers, "If we can't rise to meet their light, let's dim it." The confessor said that even when you started to fade from their daily talk, they could never stop watching. Every time you posted something, achieved something, healed from something, they studied it, they dissected it, they tried to find flaws in it. But the irony, the bitter irony, is that your quiet endurance became the very thing that broke them. Because while they had built their sense of belonging around tearing you down, you kept existing without them. You kept moving forward. You kept laughing, creating, learning, healing, and being you. And that realization, that their coordinated cruelty had failed to destroy the person it was built to erase, was the beginning of their unraveling. It turns out the same force they used to cage you became their own prison. Guilt doesn't just haunt, it corrodes. Every shared secret became a ticking time bomb. Every message, a reminder of who they became when they thought no one was watching. And now one of them has finally detonated the truth. Their whispers can no longer hide in the dark corners of memory, because truth once spoken echoes louder than any lie ever could. You can almost hear the silence shifting, the weight of all their facades collapsing under the gravity of honesty. So yes, it's real. Yes, they did it. Yes, you were right to feel the unease all those nights when something didn't add up. And no, you were never the crazy one. You were the one walking through a maze they built, trying to find daylight with nothing but your intuition as a map. But now that daylight is here, every shadow has a source, and every source has burned itself out. The lies that once shaped the air around your name have finally suffocated the people who breathed them. And where does that leave you? Exactly where you were always meant to be, standing in the ruins of their illusion, untouched in your essence, wiser than before, free in ways they'll never understand. You don't even need revenge. The truth itself did that work for you. All you need to do now is rise, rebuild, and remember. What they feared most wasn't your downfall. It was your awakening. Because awakening, once it begins, cannot be undone. It spreads quietly through the corridors of your being like light through cracked stone, illuminating every hidden scar until the truth stands bare and the pain transforms into perspective. The revelation of what they did, their lies, their envy, their carefully orchestrated deceit, is no longer a wound, but a mirror reflecting how far you've come despite every shadow they cast. You have crossed a psychological battlefield, one where your integrity was tested against their manipulation. And you emerged intact. They mistook your silence for defeat, but silence was simply the sound of you observing, learning and storing strength in places they could never reach. While they exhausted themselves maintaining a false version of reality, you were unknowingly mastering the art of endurance, of patience, of stillness before transformation. They thought they had the upper hand, but in truth, they were fighting an illusion, their version of you, not the real you. And illusions always collapse under the weight of reality. Now that the facade has fallen, you can see their entire structure for what it truly was. Fragile egos, building a house of mirrors, terrified of facing their own reflection. What once felt personal now feels almost pitiful. You can look back and recognize that they weren't strategists or masterminds. They were frightened children in adult skin, clutching at power through petty cruelty because it was the only form of control they knew. And that recognition, that quiet, unshakable clarity, is what finally sets you free. There's no need to scream, expose, or retaliate. Truth has already done the heavy lifting. Their game depended on your confusion, but the moment your vision cleared, their entire illusion collapsed under its own weight. Their story can no longer survive in the soil where your understanding now thrives. So take this moment not as a wound reopening, but as a rebirth. You walked through the fire they lit for you and emerged not broken, but reforged, stronger and radiant with purpose. The story they tried to write for you has ended, and the pen is once again in your hands. Your next chapter begins not with them, but with you, unshaken, unbothered, unstoppable. So breathe deeply, lift your chin, straighten your shoulders, and if these words stirred something familiar in your spirit, if you saw your own reflection between the lines, don't let it fade here. Like, share, and subscribe, because this isn't just a story of survival. It's a mirror for every soul that's been betrayed and still chose to rise. And if you're ready to stand beside others who've turned their pain into power, join the membership. Together we keep the light alive.